Hi, everyone. Today, I'm Allison Duke. I'm your moderator for this session. We're going to have a great conversation with two Canadian Screen Award winners. I just hope we're going to just watch some work and ask some questions at the end and have fun and have a very thoughtful conversation as well. Thank you very much for tuning in today, especially with outside the weather is kind of cold and it's rainy. And so this is a good time to just, do something that's for your soul and for your careers in terms of learning about the film industry and what these two fabulous directors are actually all about. I want to introduce our amazing directors. But first, I'm going to go with, I was going to say age before beauty, but they're both beautiful and timeless. So I just going to start with Alicia. Alicia K. Harris is a filmmaker from Scarborough, Ontario. She graduated from Ryerson University School of Image Arts, where her thesis film, Love Stinks, won Best Director and Best Production. Collectively, her films have screened on CBC, TVO, Bell 5 TV, and numerous festivals, including TIFF Next Wave and the Vancouver International Film Festival. Her latest short film, actually, I don't know if it's the latest, well, it's the latest short film, Pick, won the 2020 Best Live Action Short Award at the Canadian Screen Awards, and Best Short Film at the Miami Film Festival. Alicia is dedicated to her craft and sharing the unique stories of Black women and the underrepresented. You can just do I don't know if they can do any kind of screen acknowledgement, but I'll do a clap.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
And next, our beautiful and talented Gaddy Conte George herself, both beautiful and talented women. Gaddy Conte George is an award-winning filmmaker committed to working with marginalized communities, especially those that represent the rich cultures and complexities of the African diaspora. Her films include the feature-length documentary, The Flying Stars, which won the Best Documentary at the Bronze Lens Film Festival in 2015 in Atlanta. And she was also supported by the Sundance Documentary Film Fund. And most recently, she won 2 Canadian Screen Awards for her documentary, Mr. Jane and Finch, which premiered on CBC Docs POV. And the 2 awards that she won was the Donald Britton Award for Best Social Political Documentary and Best Documentary Writing. Through her career, Gaddy has earned a Sundance Institute Program Fellow and has been supported by all the arts councils, Toronto Arts Councils, Ontario Arts Council, and Canada Council for the Arts. Gaddy is also the co-founder of Oh Yeah Media Group, a Black women-led production company in Toronto, which I'm also a co-founder. Full disclosure, she's my business partner as well. So like I said, we're gonna do a deep dive into the work and talk about the process and some tech stuff and show some clips. And then at the end, we're going to open things up to the Zoom gallery where you can ask some questions, and hopefully we'll get a lot of questions in, because I think that's a really dynamic part of these kind of talks. But first of all, I want to congratulate both of you on your Canadian Screen Awards. Just to recap, for those of you who have missed it, if you're deep in your COVID slumber, the Canadian Screen Awards were held online due to COVID. And there wasn't any audience, and I wish we can unmute people so they can also clap and give you a cheer for accepting the award. But I just want to take you back to May, when I can't remember if the short drama category was at the same day as the documentary, but category when they were announced. But, I just want you to take you back to that time in May. What were you thinking that day? Did you have any preconceived notions of winning? Was it on your vision boards or your to-do list or your bucket list? Like, tell me, either one of you can jump in.
I'll just go first, just because you said vision board and I'm like looking at my vision board over there. I have a vision board. They work. Okay. I think it's funny because like my job is to visualize as a director. So I'm like, why wouldn't I visualize my life? So I actually went to the Canadian Screen Awards last year. It was a perk I got when I was in the Academy's directing program for women, and was like totally enamored by like the glitz and glamour, because Canadian industry is kind of underrated in Canada sometimes. Yeah. That night it's not underrated. We all know who everybody is. It's so exciting. So it was definitely on my vision board, and I got to see Stefan James like win a special award where he talked about Scarborough, and I was like, I want to be up there talking about Scarborough, like that's going to be me. I still did that in my heart when I won, but it was like after seeing that happen, I felt that was like a good omen for me. And I also saw Jasmine Matsafari win for Firecrackers, and when I was in film school, because we both went to Ryerson, I looked up to her and saw her win that day. So I felt like even before applying, I was like, there's a good omen here for me to win one of these at some point. And then I won. So yeah, it was on the vision board. Check. I did it.
I'm glad you mentioned Scarborough, because I'm also from Scarborough. So we would have been Scarborough.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to shout out Scarborough so hard, but Stefan did it. I'll do it next time.
Yeah, good for you. And Gaddy?
So yeah, definitely not repping Scarborough here, but I will represent Oakwood and Vaughan and the west end of the city. But for me, it's, you know, I don't have a vision board, but you know, I think awards are always an accolade that you always imagine that will happen at some point in your career. And I don't know, maybe I'm just a little bit more jaded. I just never really kept that in my periphery right now. Just in, you know, different things that happen over the years in this industry that leave you to be overlooked on multiple occasions. So for me, I just, being nominated was enough for me. I thought, okay, I'm recognized by my peers, good, I've won. So come to the awards night, I was thinking, okay, it was a fun night. I got my whole family, I got my kids to dress up, my mom dressed up, I dressed up, we set the laptop up in the dining room, and it was just a fun evening, you know, in the middle of COVID, to be able to like just get all dolled up. And you know, and then we had many members of our crew. We had a big a group Zoom call, and we had Mr. LaRose, our subject of our film, be on our Zoom call as well. So it was just nice to see everybody and just enjoy the evening. So for me, that was it. And so to actually hear our names called, I was in complete shock. And I don't know if anyone watched the video. I had my husband record my reaction, and it was it was
pandemonium. You know, it was really, really like wild. I look back at our videos and I'm like, wow, that's a bit much. But
right? And like I feel bad because my 4-year-old didn't understand what was happening. He didn't know why mommy was screaming and my grandma was screaming and cheering, and you know, because like he thought I won something, but so why am I screaming? And so he got a little afraid, but that was okay. We prepared him for the second time in case it would happen, but I definitely did not think we were going to win twice. And so that was even more of a shocker. I think in that moment, I was just happy that they pronounced my name right. You know, more than anything, I was like, yay, another victory. So it was definitely, you know, this was really surreal, you know, and I think it still a little bit is surreal because we didn't have a real, because we didn't have it in person. So, I mean, my babies arrived last week, so I can touch them, I can hold them, and it's real. It's real now.
Awesome. I'm glad that you pointed out that they're behind you there. Okay, so you know, it is definitely a milestone in anybody's career to be recognized by their peers on this kind of a platform. So maybe, you know, let's learn a little bit more about you. Okay, so we're here at the, you know, CSAs. You got your awards and all that. What was your trajectory getting to this point? Can you, Alicia? Maybe we start with you and then go back to Gaddy.
Sure. I'll just add, Gaddy, the video that you have of your reaction is so sweet and beautiful and endearing. So it's funny because mine, I don't have anybody recording me, and mine's just like me recording the screen, and then the device drops, and like it's just... Anyways, so it's everyone screaming, and then you see my cat like run across the room, and yours is like this beautiful, like I almost cried watching yours. It's so beautiful. But anyways, yeah, so I'm so glad that we both, all of us here on this panel, got recognized for our work, because we're all amazing and we deserve it. But yeah, my journey is I went to Ryerson Film School for 4 years, and then got my film degree, and then I spent the time after graduating just trying to, I received the advice, like, if you were going to be a director, you just have to make work. So I decided not to like work for anybody else's company and just do, you know, small production design jobs here and there to stay inspired and in film. But mostly to just develop my projects and raise money. So I spent a good amount of time trying to raise money to make Pick, and I made a shorter film called Maybe If It Were a Nice Room, which was like my first independent film, which helped me get grants. So pretty much leading up to even making Pick, it was just a lot of grant writing, a lot of fundraising. We fundraised $20,000 for Pick on Kickstarter, because I really care about this film a lot. If for anybody who doesn't know, it's about a young Black girl who wears her afro to school on picture day and has to deal with the unexpected consequences. So it's a personal story, and I just knew for like my first big hurrah after film school, and for this story specifically, like I had to have enough money to do it justice, to pay everybody, and to like have it be as beautiful and amazing as it was in my head. So I mean, along the way, I worked at the hair store. I told myself it was research, but I really needed a job. and I did do production design on people's projects, which was really fun and inspiring to watch other directors work. Ultimately, now I'm retired because I'm a working director, woo. But it took all that time to like make Pick, raise the money for it. I went to festivals with my thesis film, you know, make connections, to finally have that work be out in the world and then be recognized. Feels like a long journey, but there was a lot of little victories along the way that kept me going.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Gaddy, you've been in the industry a little longer. Can you just, tell us about your journey getting to this point?
Yeah, well, my journey's quite a bit longer. I made my first short 16 years ago with the National Film Board of Canada. And that was a few years out of film school. I went to school in the United States on a track and field scholarship. And so when I came back, I did have a lot of trouble getting into the industry because I had not done any networking prior. But, found my way at the NFB and made my first short. And then after that, I knew in my head that I wanted to edit because of just how much post-production could affect our stories and the way we as Black people are portrayed. And so for me, I thought, directing, it's hard to be a working director. And especially for me in documentaries, it takes years of research before projects even get to production. So I thought, to me, practically, if I worked as a video editor, then I could still do the directing on the side. And so that's kind of what I did. And I worked in broadcast television as an editor for Bravo when it was a television station, on a few of their shows for a few years. And then I went on to produce my own show when the network Aux came out, and that was the first alternative music station to Much Music for emerging music. And so I produced a half-hour hip-hop show, their flagship hip-hop show for that network for a few years. And then I also did a cooking show, Rhyming Chef, and so produced, directed, edited, camera, all of that stuff. And so I did that for a few years and did some, shorts along the way there. Also did production management with Frances Ann Sullivan's production company when she had a series, Literature Alive. And I also directed 3 episodes of that series. And then I went into development on Flying Stars, my first feature-length documentary. And we were in development for at least 3 years, and then just decided to do it on our own. And then Kickstarter was something that came about and became a thing. And so we were, I think, the first documentary, the second documentary in Canada to ever have a successful Kickstarter campaign back in 2010. Before Kickstarter was ever even in Canada, we had to get an American friend to take all the money for us because it had to be an American bank account. And
that's a real hustle. That's real.
Yeah, it was a hustle, and she eventually became an associate producer.
Exactly.
Right. So you got to do what you got to do. And that was a great experience early on, understanding crowdsourcing. And then we ended up eventually pitching at TIFF, and we were the first documentary to ever win TIFF Pitch This competition, which was great. And then from there we received a grant from the Sundance Documentary Fund. And so then that took another 3 more years to make that documentary through production and post-production. And then when the film came out, I kind of, went more part-time into filmmaking to start my family and to have my 2 children. And then kind of revved back up when my youngest was 1 with you, Allison, doing a short documentary, Dudley Speaks for Me, which was part of the Kua Benjamin Legacy Project, which was a series of short documentaries honoring the legacies of Black Canadian activists. So that experience was wonderful. And that's kind of what led me to Mr. Jane and Finch, because in doing that documentary, I had a mutual friend of Mr. Jane and Finch, Mr. Winston LaRose, introduced me to him because Winston LaRose had been archiving and filming the Black community in Canada and around the world for the past 50 years. And he had this extensive archive of many of the activists we covered in those short documentaries. And so he thought, how come you don't know this man? And how come you made these films and you didn't use his archive? And, when I met Winston, it was amazing. And when I started seeing some of his archive, I said, oh my goodness, the kind of stories we could have told if we had access to his footage. And so that kind of led us into Mr. Jane and Finch.
Okay, we'll stop there. Anything you want to say to introduce the trailers of both of your films? We're going to show some trailers. Yeah?
I don't have anything to say other than my film is a short, so it was hard to cut the trailer for it, which I cut myself. Well, with a short film, you're not trying to give everything away, but it
looks amazing though. It looks amazing. Let's show it. Let's show it.
Okay, yeah, just show the trailer.
Yeah.
Hands in your lap. Look here. Okay, we're gonna count down from 3. 3.
Do you wash your hair?
2.
Do you wash your hair?
1.
Awesome. Very nice. Very nice. And
Yeah,
let's just
a little taste.
Yeah, awesome. We'll get back to talking about it. Let's Gaddy, you show Mr. Jane and Finch the trailer, and then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion.
Some of the worst criminals in this country.
The Jane Finch corridor already suffers from the problems of high-density living.
The press have focused so much on the negative,
stigmatizing the Jane Finch community by wearing a bulletproof vest.
We're going to put more officers out in the streets.
We need more police officers on the streets.
Our politicians are not dealing with the fundamental root causes. I'm running for councillor.
He's been the driving force behind this community.
Mr. LaRose is a pillar in this community.
And he connects the community in ways that many people need to know.
Set, go!
The people there have been very poorly represented.
One of the councillors referred to Jane and Finch as cockroaches.
But you're not going to get the cooperation of people that come from Mr. Jane and Finch himself. My community is my family. It's the people in the community that gives me the strength.
Your biggest challenge, taking off your community activist hat and becoming your candidate hat.
My political campaign cannot take me away from my work in the community.
Wow, very impressive. Both films. And you know what, I want you to talk more about, the subject matter and all that. But before that, both of the trailers showed these iconic shots of your leading characters. You had some very nice framing. You had a hero shot for both of them in a very unique way. Can you talk about that and those images of your, you know what I'm talking about? You, like, both of your characters, you had this one singular shot that just said the whole story. Can you talk about that image, coming up with that?
I mean, with Pick, which hopefully people get to see it at some point if you haven't already seen it. The visual style is basically planned around the fact that we don't see the lead character's face until the last shot of the film. So you get a little bit of that from the trailer. So yeah, I basically was just like, what am I trying to do with this film? And the main objective was to get people to empathize with the character. And I figured it would be an interesting choice to not show her face, so people really have to figure out how she's feeling without getting the satisfaction of actually seeing it. So that kind of led to a lot of the film being her hair, which I think is pretty perfect, because oftentimes when I'm wearing any hairstyle, it feels like it's the only thing people can see of me. I love my hair, it's art, it's beautiful, but you know, we are obviously more than our physical appearance. So yeah, I think in choosing this style, it's like on the one side, we can see her hair so much, so close up for so much of the film, and you can see how beautiful it is and like it's truly art. And then it's also like how she feels, which is everybody can only see her hair so much. That yeah, there's just a lot of iconic hair moments in this film because of that.
It's like the coming of age of the hero shot. You see her kind of not, feeling so good about herself and her, what's happening to her in school and whatnot. And then we see her at the end, of course, but it's just very iconic images there. And then Mr. Jane and Finch, yeah, very, very well done. And for Mr. Jane and Finch, you have that iconic shot too of Mr. LaRose under, the Jane and Finch corridor intersection signs, which everybody knows. Right.
Yeah. And so it's kind of, it said it all. Like if anything could say it in one shot, it was, Jane Finch, Mr. Jane and Finch. And so we shot that early on in development, on the first time we shot him in that community, and it just made sense. And it was just a very natural thing to do. He wanted us to take us on a tour of the neighborhood. And so we just kind of let him take the lead, and we ended up there, and then we placed him and did a bunch of shots around there. And that kind of has always stuck as the image for the film, for the still photography and for the video. Him and in that suit, that was kind of like his superhero costume, is him in his gray suit and the hat. That's kind of how he always presented himself, and that's kind of how I wanted to kind of show him, in his element.
Awesome. You want to both talk about, why this film? Like, can you talk about, why this subject? Where did the idea come from? And I know, Gaddy, you talked a little bit about the archives coming to you, but, what is interesting to you about this subject? Do you have a personal connection with the work and the themes that you see in the films?
For me, I like to make the films that I wish I saw as a child. I don't know if I'm always going to be making films about children, but so far everything I've written is like filling that gap. And I know if I had seen a film like Pick, I would have felt a little less alone in my experience. And I mean, I didn't experience the exact sequence of events in the film, but I definitely experienced like not seeing myself represented or my experiences represented on screen, or pretty much anyone that looked like me being celebrated as beautiful in any type of mainstream media. So that led to me feeling like I wasn't beautiful as a child. There was something wrong with me, and it was my hair. So what I really wanted to do with this film was show microaggressions, and I don't even like the word micro, but because it kind of makes it seem like it's small. But ultimately, I just wanted to show these are these small things that you are doing and saying that have a huge impact on anybody, but especially children, and kind of show the impact that these small events can happen over time. So you do see an entire day of this character dealing with microaggressions, and everybody just is making that one comment, but how much that adds up over a lifetime is detrimental, especially when you are a child still forming your idea of beauty and yourself, and people are, you know, reaching out to touch your hair or making fun of your hair or constantly asking you ignorant, like inappropriate, uncomfortable questions, which still happens as an adult, but I'm better equipped to deal with it. So my main plan with the film, obviously, was first to share my own truth in hopes that people would relate to it, other Black women, and that people would learn from it. But I'm also currently in the planning to get it into schools and develop a teaching guide to go with it, because of course it's very specific about Black hair and microaggressions, but it's super, I think everybody can relate to the themes of being alone, feeling alone, and feeling othered by everybody else around you. So I would love to get it into schools, because I think there's a lot that everybody can learn from it.
Do you have an educational distributor?
No.
I'll introduce you to one. We'll introduce you to one.
Okay.
We'll talk to you later. Okay.
Mr. Allison.
It's more of a long-term goal, but yes.
More to-do lists. I know when you make a film, there's so many other things you got to do, right? Especially when you make films about community, about, you know, activism, or just building awareness. There's so many other things you can do with the film besides like broadcasts and film festivals. So yeah, we could talk about that later. But Gaddy, you're not from Jane and Finch. You know, what up? Tell me.
Yeah, definitely not at all. Not from Jane and Finch, and I did struggle with that for a lot, because I felt like, you know, that I felt like it's a film about Jane and Finch should come from the community. So for me, how I made peace with that was I'm telling this man's story, and this man's story can't be told without telling the story of that community that he holds so dearly. That community is a part of him. So to leave that part out of the story wouldn't be able to do him justice. So my my approach to documentary filmmaking, or one of the things I like to do, is I like to tell stories from our community of us helping ourselves, doing the work. Because I think so often we're portrayed with that whole white savior complex of needing to be saved, how other people come in and swoop in and save us, but we can save ourselves, and we have been saving ourselves, and we have been doing the work. And we've been doing that work very under-resourced, all, you know, for countless years. And someone like him, who has been doing the work, and you see it in the film, and you can see how under-resourced he is, you know. But anyway, so that's kind of what the motivation was, to, you know, to show people, you know, and same with Flying Stars, is that, you know, I when I did that film, that was about, amputees who were, you know, lifting themselves up, you know, out of civil war and out of stigma and out of, you know, their struggles with PTSD. So those are the kinds of stories I like to tell. And so, with Mr. LaRose, when I first started making this film was about his archive. And as I got to know him and spend time with him, and I would go meet with him in his office in the Jane and Finch community, I started seeing how beloved he was by the community, how I couldn't walk, you know, 10 feet with him without someone, you know, giving him a hug or stopping off to like have a conversation with him. And, you know, Mr. LaRose, Mr. Jane and Finch, you know, kind of like the, you know, it was just constant. And so it was very clear very early on that had to be a part of the story. And then, you know, he decided to run for political office. And so that became the, you know, the story, the dominant story.
And hopefully we can get it. Let's play two more clips. Let's play, we're gonna play two clips from the actual films, and then we'll get into a little bit more about the visual aspects of the films and your approaches to composition and framing, more directing stuff, talking to actors, subjects.
All right.
When it's time, please keep your hands together in your lap.
Actually, let's all do that now since we're just about ready.
The young lady in the middle, can you move to the back?
Aaliyah, he's talking to you.
I've always been in the middle row.
That was before.
Since grade 1.
Your hair is blocking some of the other students. Parents will complain.
I'm not as tall as the people in the back row.
Please don't argue with me. I'm just trying to keep things fair for everyone. All right. Big smiles, everyone. 1, 2, 3.
Cheese.
One more on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Cheese.
Okay, great. Let's talk about this one first. Let's talk about this one first, and then we'll play. Yes, because we've just seen it. When all the images to be fresh in everybody's mind. Could you just walk us through, this scene in terms of your approach to directing it and all the aspects you kind of thought through?
Yeah. So this is the climax. Sorry, everybody. But hopefully you get to see the film. I'm always happy to send a link. But yeah, basically after dealing with all these microaggressions for this whole day, the character finally gets to picture day, the class photo, and the photographer asks her to move to the back. And as we can see, she is completely blocked by the other student. So going along with what I was saying about the visual style, this is actually the first scene in the movie where I kind of break the rules a bit, because every other scene, we really don't see her face at all. It is pretty much completely from behind and from the side. And in this scene, we get to see the most of her face, and we get to see her eye, which is like the first time you see her eye in the movie, which was actually kind of an accident because the person kept moving. And then when I went to review the take, I was like, okay, I think we can break the rules a little bit in this scene because this is like the most emotional moment for the character. But yeah,
it's kind of interesting. It was like a happy accident because it was very interesting to see her eyes. Like, oh wow, it just made it more like she was trying to.
Exactly. And we could get just from her eye that she wasn't smiling.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a nice happy accident, because I was really like, nope, we can't see her face. We have to, because that was what I was going for. But I ended up going with that take because I was like, actually, it's nice that we do get a taste of how she feels in this moment. And then with the coverage, for the whole movie, it is very focused on her experience. So there's very few faces and we rarely see people actually speaking. So even when the photographer is speaking, I don't even think we have coverage of him. I didn't want to cut to him. We didn't even shoot it. I didn't want to cut to him at all. We just are watching her the whole time through this difficult conversation for her, because I just really wanted to emphasize, like, this is her story. This is her experience. And the whole idea of not seeing her face and the limited coverage and perspective that I gave people, I wanted it to feel almost like the audience is like a bystander watching all of these things happen. They're not getting every angle and every perspective. They're just a part of what's happening. So I really wanted it to be very limited. We just get that intro of like, here's the wide, and then the whole rest of the scene is basically her standing there. And talking, like standing up for herself to him. And then of course the moment where she moves behind and then we see everybody pass her, which is also like one of my favorite shots, because just like looks cool.
Yeah, it's a very objective point of view, because we don't really see her, going through things. We are very much, voyeurs in this, like, oh, look at what is happening to this young woman in school. So it actually was very powerful in that way. That we were able to, almost like we were in a theater watching this, being projected.
Yeah, I really wanted to keep it very limited. And there's a lot of choices with the whole film where I really just wanted it to be uncomfortable. And it's maybe not the most evident in this scene because we only watched a minute, but there's some scenes where I stay in the same shot for like a whole minute because I just wanted it to be slow. There's no music. There's no music in the whole movie. I really thought to myself, like, how can I make the audience feel what the character feels? How can I make them feel as uncomfortable as she feels? And what makes people uncomfortable? Silence, like slow, like, you know, the movie is 10 minutes, but honestly, when you watch it, it feels longer because there's a lot of long takes. There's not a lot of cutting. There's not a lot of shots that we see, which was all very deliberate because I just wanted the audience to feel that discomfort that she feels. And only when I break those rules are like the super intense moments. So even here, rule broken, we see her eye. The last shot of the movie, we see her face. There's flashes of a camera and we see her face. And then we have a montage of like a photo booth sequence, which is kind of like a horror movie basically.
Yes.
But it's like camera flash, face, camera flash.
It was great.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's a lot. There's like deliberate moments in the movie where I break the rules that I created.
But also beautifully composed. Like, you know, your shots, you know, were very composed and very stylized. Not in a, you know, grotesque way, but just in a very like, you know, beautiful, you know, way. And so I want you to talk a little bit about the composition, and then we'll throw it to Gaddy to watch.
Well, thank you. I have done production design and I feel my style is very painterly. I want this film is all static camera, and I just want whatever is in the frame to be speaking to the story. So every color, like to the point where in the color correction, if there was one tiny thing that was not in the palette, we changed it because I'm just like, everybody in the class is wearing the same color. If you see that wide shot, red curtain, everyone's wearing red and blue. And I was like, hey, the photographer is wearing red, the teacher's wearing blue. And all the aggressors in the film are wearing red, and all the complacent people are wearing blue, and all the positive characters are wearing yellow. So, and she's the only one wearing white. So I'm very deliberate with colors. Even if people don't immediately notice, it does create a very distinct feeling. There's very distinct color palettes in this film. Of the happy spaces are like yellow and mint, and the threatening spaces are blue and red. And because we were shooting this in such a limiting way, as in we are hiding the character's face, me and my cinematographer did plan out pretty much every single shot to a T of where it was going to be in the location. So everything that was in the frame was going to be production design. There was nothing that we used that was already kind of there. It was all in the color palette. There was no on the day. I'm not that director. On the day, I'm not like, we're shooting the other side of the room, which I've had as a designer. And I'm like, I didn't bring anything for that. But it was all very deliberate because I do want every shot to be like its own beautiful painting, and everything within that frame to have meaning that is adding to what I'm trying to do.
Like perfection. Awesome. Yeah, I could see it.
I'm glad it felt that way.
No, it was really great. Okay, and Gaddy, let's see a scene from Mr. Jane and Finch.
The biggest threat for us here in this area is the coming revitalization, the rebranding, and the redevelopment on Jane Finch. What impact is that going to have on the people? Most people who heard of Jane Finch heard of it in a negative sense and do not know how that perception came about. In pre-colonial times, this sacred land was the traditional territory of many nations, including the Wendat, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis. Then in the 60s, development rapidly expanded in the area.
Enough is enough. We cannot and will not allow 7 more buildings at the corner of Jane and Finch. It's that simple.
Between 1960 and 1971, the population in the Jane Finch skyrocketed from 1,300 to 33,000 people. Social housing grew from 8 to 22%. The social infrastructure did not keep pace with the increasing densities. This was a perfect recipe for a troubled neighborhood.
The Jane Finch corridor already suffers from the problems of high-density living. Police say the crime rate is escalating.
The press and media have focused so much on the negative of what ends up happening here. And unfortunately, that's only probably a 0.1% of what goes on.
It's a community that has undergone significant travail. It has been badly represented.
The Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services under fire tonight, accused of stigmatizing the Jane Finch community by wearing a bulletproof vest when he went to the area.
Personally, I went out to Jane and Finch, put on a bulletproof vest, and spent 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning visiting sites that had previously had bullet-ridden people killed in the middle of the night. The police need tools to work with.
All right. Wow. I was ready to watch the movie again. I was like, oh.
Same.
Yeah. Great work again, Gaddy. You want to walk us through this very complex conversation and piece in this film. Working in documentary, I know it's different from working in dramatic filmmaking. So there's all these layers that you're putting together to make a statement. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so this was, I knew that to contextualize Jane and Finch now, I wanted to explain how it came to be. Like, I felt like I couldn't leave that out of the film because so many people, blame the current residents of the community of like, that's why it is the way it is. And it's like, it's not. It was poor community development. It was poor planning, and we need to show that. And in showing that, there was so much information, and we did a lot of research. And it was a way of giving a history lesson that was still entertaining, that was, still a lot of facts with statistics, and those numbers were important. So I thought, how can we do that in a creative way? But first off, because we're talking about land, I felt like it was really important. It was really important to me to have some kind of visual land acknowledgement of the first people who actually occupied that land or who had that land. And so I reached out to the artist David Strickland, an Indigenous artist who allowed us to use his beautiful artwork. And that's actually came from a land acknowledgement piece he created in Parkdale. And so we had that piece and we gave it to our motion graphics designer who, jazzed it all up. And so that was important, one, to have that. And then two, the drone footage, because I really wanted to show what that community looks like. It's not just high rises, it's so much more. And the idea for me was seeing the high rises. I wanted the statistics and the numbers to be at those high rises. So I, when we organized the drone shoot, I was very specific about those shots of having the drone move up to show those high rises, because I knew in my mind that I wanted to have the some kind of graphical chart to show the growth of the population matched along with that. And then we had access to this archival footage that gentleman there that talks about this community being stigmatized. That's actually a community meeting that Mr. LaRose recorded back in maybe in the 80s or 90s. And then also the community barbecue. That's a community barbecue that they've had on Canada Day for probably 30 years now. And so he had footage of it. And so we went and actually shot that same barbecue on July 1st in 2018 when we were filming, and then had that old footage with the new footage. So like this is a neighborhood. And then to juxtapose it with also the voice of them talking about how negative this community is. Meanwhile, we're seeing people in the community of how it actually exists, which is people having joy and living life. And it's not how, the media says. And so we were very purposeful of having, like that piece and the community center and just all like the footage of, what Jane and Finch looks like versus how people are talking about it. It was, yeah. So.
Yeah, the contrast between the two is like very, different. And like Gaddy, I'm just going to ask you a question about stylistically. There is some style in there because I've seen you work with all these different elements and putting them together. It's almost like you're instead of going the minimalist way, you're doing like sort of like this quilt of information. Can you talk about that stylistically and how does that how does that mess with your head? Like, I don't know, like sometimes I worked with you on this project, co-writing and producing, and we would go back and forth on some things. And yeah, just talk to me about what's in your head when you're thinking about all these different elements that you're working with.
I think because I'm an editor, I think of things like on a timeline, so I can like see the layers on the timeline in my head and how they all come together. And so a lot of the times I picture it as that finished product, and then I build back from it. So I kind of like, I knew I wanted the chart, and I knew when I was doing the research and I saw the numbers and I was shocked by the numbers, I'm like, how do we talk about the numbers without just talking about the numbers? How can we, like, what is that thing? So for me, a lot of it is I kind of have all those different layers like in my mind, and then like visually, how can we represent those layers? And then either from what we've already shot, because a lot of the times in documentary, you're building those things in post, because you can't always control what happens in real life, or and then also, you know, we had the script, and from the script, I knew I was going to have to do a section on the history. So that part, a lot of, most of that was planned out ahead of time and through the research. But like things like that police officer, or not police officer, the member of parliament going to the community with the bulletproof vest, that story was something that came up in our research documents. And so then we had to go out and find the footage of him actually saying that and getting the clearance. So that was added in post. That wasn't actually part of the original script and part of the planning of when we were in production shooting.
And make sure we use it, that we could pass E&O and all that stuff.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So anyway, I'll stop.
No, it's all great. I just want to give, before we open it up, I want to give people a sense, because we've, once again, Alicia, she's a dramatic director. Gaddy is a documentary director. Just the different process working with, an actor, your actor, Alicia, and Gaddy working with a subject. Just your process working. Alicia, you can go first on your wonderful actress that you had there. I think her name?
Her name's Hazel.
Hazel, but you called her.
The character is Aaliyah.
Yeah, Aaliyah. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I find this part to be the most arbitrary to explain, because when people have asked me like, what kind of director are you? I notice I'm just describing what kind of person I am. So it's, yes, I have techniques, but I think the main thing that I did on this set was just to try to make it a positive environment with a good vibe where people could feel like they could be vulnerable. Obviously acting is a very vulnerable place to be in, because you're in front of the camera and everybody's just like standing around. But I luckily had the opportunity to hang out with her a few times before the shoot to like build that relationship. And ultimately it was her first film. I guided her to give that performance, but like, I can't really take all the credit, but I can take the credit for like creating the vibe and like getting the right people on set so she could feel like she could do her best work.
Did she have to have the hair to get the role?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because when we did the casting, like the casting call, like we didn't have very many options. Like there's not that many young actors with natural hair. And I actually looked at every page of like casting workbook. Oh, sorry. There was one page searching the age group. I looked at the one page and saw her and was like, we should ask her to audition. And then she did. And she actually, seeing her with her afro inspired me to cut off all my hair to like regrow my afro back. So I mean, that's not really answering the question, but
I get it though. We get it.
It's just relationships. Like, I think it is similar in that I built a relationship with her where she felt like she obviously has acting ability already without me being there to guide the tone and how I have it in my head. But I think we just build a relationship with her and her family. And then on the day, it's kind of just like, I'm friends with her, just being like, I'm maybe not her aunt. I'm an aunt type of figure. She's younger than me, but just like,
I feel like your aunt and she's your, like the ages.
We're cousins.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Cool. And Gaddy, working with, being a documentary director, and working with subjects, or I don't like to call them subjects, but with people that are in the film.
Yeah, I think
can you talk about working with Mr. LaRose?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing. It comes down to the relationships and the relationship building. Because for me, you can only get surface level stories if you don't actually have that person's trust and that person understands what your intent is of what you're going to do with their story or their experience. And so for me, I spent I think we spent almost a year just getting to know each other before we even pulled the camera out. And that was just me, a lot of calls, a lot of email, a lot of just spending time with him and his community. Sometimes I would just go there and hang out in his office for the day and just observe. Or I went along with him when he had to go and meet with the Children's Aid Office with one of his clients. And I just sat there and I just observed. I wanted to see, how does he work? How does he operate? How does he relate to people? And I think through all of that built our relationship, because then he understood my commitment to him into really, telling him his story truthfully and honestly. And so, by the end, he used to joke and say, nobody can tell me anything, nobody can tell me what to do except for Gaddy.
Yeah, he used to say that. Yeah.
And he's an 80-year-old man. He's an 83-year-old man now. And, he's stuck in his ways, but I ask him to do something and there's no hesitation, but that took a lot of time to build. So I think it's all about building the relationships and building that trust.
Yeah. Especially for docs, when you're asking your people that you're working with and filming stuff to do over and over again, right? So yeah, you have to be friends almost. Okay, so I think we could, are there questions or can I keep going? Any questions? Okay, there's no questions. Okay. Is there like a, can people, how do we know how we're doing? Okay, question. Alicia, Alicia, did you have to hire a casting director?
No. Well, I had a casting director who was not like a professional casting director that I hired, but somebody who I'd worked with in film school. So she did have the knowledge of like how to communicate with agents and set up auditions and casting. But like I said, it was hard to find options because, if you see it, you can be it. We need more young Black girls to go into acting. But we just did really, we used the casting websites, but we also just did a very large grassroots, like posting on Facebook groups, emailing schools, like emailing acting schools, because our project was non-union. So we were kind of opening it up to non-actors also. But ultimately we found Hazel because, like I said, I went on the one page, searched age group, Black child, like on the casting website, and she came up and we reached out to her. And some of the other actors I cast, I already knew from my other film. But yeah, we found everybody through casting websites. Technically, my friend was the casting director, but she wasn't a professional. So you can still definitely find great talent just by doing it on your own. And I think Pig is proof of that. But maybe one day I'll have a budget to have a casting director in a union film, but for now I've enjoyed like working with the people that I have worked with and meeting the actors that I have met, because I'm sure eventually Hazel will be in the union and then I'll be working with her there. But every child I've directed, it's been their first film, so that's been fun. Yeah. It's been fun to be like the first director to like set the bar, and I'm like such a I've done camp coordinating, so I'm like so like hype on the set, like a camp coordinator. And then so I'm setting the bar high, I think, for like energy and like fun for the kids. But
when you get the pro kids, then you might change your mind.
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't know.
I'm only saying that. I'm joking around. Okay.
Love it.
Everybody who knows me closely knows that I like to joke around, so I hope I didn't offend anybody. Okay. So there's a question about booking. I don't know if it's me, Alicia, Gaddy, for a podcast. We can follow up with that person later. Could you be more specific of who you want on the show? There's a question from Andre Anthony. Where can I watch these films? Where can we watch it?
Yeah, well, Mr. Jane and Finch you can watch on CBC Gem, and just go to the documentary category and look for Mr. Jane and Finch.
And my film is currently on a private Vimeo link, but it's going to be out soon. So the best way that you can watch it is just to follow me on Instagram and wait for me to announce that. And my Instagram is at @AliciaKHarris_. But we are still doing festival screenings that are online. So if you do follow my Instagram or the Pick Instagram, Pick Short Film, you will hear about that. But it is going to be online somewhere soon for sure.
Absolutely. And then Alicia, there's a question here about, were you also producing and production designing as well as directing on Pick?
So no, I directed solely and I wrote it and co-produced it with my other producers, but I didn't production design it. As a production designer, I know how much they bring to the table. So I like to collaborate with somebody else, even though in the pre-production process, I have a very, very elaborate production design plan that I know other directors don't have because I've worked with other directors. So I am definitely giving way more detail. These are the exact colors. This is the exact, not exact, but basically this is exactly how I've already imagined it. But I still love to collaborate with the production designer because they are still bringing other ideas to the table that I'm not thinking of. But even in the script, the production design is pretty much already written in. I'm already thinking about the world. So I don't production design it because I like the collab, but I definitely have already thought about it very specifically.
Yeah. I could only imagine what's in your head when.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question from Lori Townsend. Can you both talk about the writing process for doc versus drama? So maybe I'll throw this to Gaddy and then you can chime in.
Well, for me, the writing process begins with research, and then from research, it's writing a treatment. So you're kind of writing, and some people write a treatment in a script form, some people write it in regular, paragraph form. I prefer just regular paragraph form. I don't, I'm not a script writer. So, I write the documentary out start to finish. And the things I don't know, the things that haven't happened yet, I imagine where it could happen based on the research and my understanding of the subject matter and of the people that I'm involving. And I kind of write that trajectory of where I think it will go. And so that kind of helps me plan my shoot days, and kind of almost use that as like my, break that down and kind of plan my shoot days around that. So that's my writing process.
Awesome. We have a lot of questions now. Okay. Is it okay for actors to audition with their iPhone cameras? And when you are casting the actors, to what extent did you share about the story to them?
Yeah, I do, especially now everything's self-tape. But at Pick, we would accept self-tapes and in-person auditions. But I will say, I don't think I've ever, other than it when it was entirely self-tapes, I usually will pick somebody who I've seen in person, just because I ask personal questions and I like to vibe with that makes it sound like an interrogation. I usually ask, like for Pick, I ask like, what's your favorite hairstyle? And I like to try to get to know people in the actual audition. It's not just reading the script. So even if I give those questions for a self-tape, it's still not usually the same vibe. But now, I've cast a music video, it's all self-taped. So of course, everybody's on the same playing field. But yeah, I think ultimately, as long as you have good lighting and with your iPhone, that is key, because I have watched self-tapes where I can't really properly consider the person's abilities because the room is so dark. Or so that does literally, and I'm just like, turn on a lamp, I'm sorry, I can't, I think you're good,
move that lamp over there over here.
Yeah, so
side light or something. Some film. Yeah. You need some film, buddy.
Yeah, so I'll just say, like, ultimately it's more about good lighting and not a distracting background, and good sound. Good lighting and good sound. Your camera usually doesn't matter if you're doing a self-tape. I mean, I'm sure it does, but it's, can we see you and hear you? Because obviously that's what I'm judging the audition on.
I think there's a question, Barbara, Telefilm. What is the best way to get in touch with both of you? If you're from Telefilm, then I'm sure it will be very easy. We'll make that happen. Okay, so how do you women, right, handle distribution? Could you tell us if you had extra hands helping with promotions and distribution?
Yeah. Well, we, for Mr. Jane and Finch, for promotions, we actually had in our budget PR. So we had Sasha Soltz doing our PR, but it was also, team effort internally as well, handling our social media accounts. With social media, that's, I think, such a big boost to like how you can do your own promotion. We have an educational distributor for Mr. Jane and Finch, McIntyre Media, and we had a broadcaster, so that kind of took care of that. And I'll pass it on to Alicia to talk about.
Yeah, we did most of our promotion from Kickstarter because that was a whole other promotional campaign even before the film was released. And then we did have a publicist for our actual premiere. And now we are, I don't know if I'm officially allowed to announce it, but we will be working with a distributor. But we did all of the festival stuff on our own and came up with our festival strategies and like did that whole shebang, which is just like a huge learning experience every time. We did all of and I do all the social media pretty much on my own. So I can't wait to have the resources to pay people to do social media because that is just the whole thing. But it is so important. And it is actually how we funded PIC through Kickstarter was like bomb social media. So it's definitely worth the time and energy. PIC short film on Instagram.
Okay.